And welcome to another special edition of the One Hood Power Hour. I am your co-host, Kahari Mosley, here with Ryan White. We have another great conversation and a number of conversations tonight. We will be meeting with a number of the candidates that are running for a statewide appellate court. That's the Pennsylvania Superior Court, Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court, Pennsylvania Supreme Court. For those who are not aware, let's give them just a quick civics lesson. Pennsylvania Supreme Court is the highest court in the land, the kind of final arbiter of cases as they move up through the Pennsylvania unified judicial system. Then we also have a Superior Court, which is a court where, when you appeal things out of the Court of Common Pleas, generally, that this is where, things end up before maybe they eventually get to the state Supreme Court. And you also have Commonwealth Court that generally deals with governmental matters, when the state is involved in litigation, when the state is getting sued or the state is suing someone, or there's generally something involved with state government. But that's kind of just a quick thing. If you really, want to find out more, definitely, Google. There's some great Wikipedia pages and some other stuff like ballotpedia.com that has some great, explanations. And we have some PSAs that are going to be running as well, that are going to be educating folks, about these offices. But I want to bring, Ryan in, as well. We spent a lot of time over the last several weeks, researching the candidates and reading about, and many of them have, filled out a questionnaire that we're going to be putting out, some scorecards beginning tomorrow, to let, people know how the candidates kind of line up, with the values of one hood power. But, Ryan, is there anything else you want to add, just about, what folks should know, about the statewide appellate courts from your point of view?
No, I think you covered that really well. We're just really excited to be able to put those questionnaires out tomorrow. Thank you to all of the candidates who are able to fill that out for us. Again, the way we're doing it, we're not specifically endorsing anybody. We're really just, as Kahari kind of broke down already, putting together these questionnaires, just to map out, based on all the different questions and their responses, how these candidates, judicial philosophies, and approaches to this position, really line up with our values and our mission. So we're just, really excited to be able to put that out tomorrow. Absolutely.
And just to also mention, just a little bit about, the criteria. We had, an 18 question, questionnaire, with a kind of a kind of short essay section. And we hopefully, we try to design it that it wouldn't take that long to complete, because someone who's been, in the civic process just knows like how bogged down you can get by doing questionnaires, and it can kind of keep you away from doing the work of reaching the people. So we didn't want to, necessarily make it a distraction, but, did want to provide a platform to learn more, about the candidates from our perspective. So each, response was given a specific, point total. And then, we basically just use a cumulative score so that we could really be objective as possible. We kind of decided, what the results were going to be as far as the points, prior, to sending out the questionnaire, and based on, the answers, how they fit into, the point totals, that would decide, what the scorecard was going to be. Not really anything that we could be subjective or, manipulate the process from a subjective point of view. So we wanted to figure out, which is obviously difficult, in this kind of process, to be as objective as possible. But that's definitely, what we wanted to shoot for, to maintain, the integrity, of what we're trying to do. And again, focusing, on the values of our organization and not, political, personalities and things like that, So again, we want to thank everybody for, who has participated, in the process and got our emails, and to turn around, their responses, very fast. So, but, before we get, into our first guest round, do you have any real quick, take or anything, outside of, tonight's important discussion about the appellate courts in Pennsylvania that you want to raise?
Yeah, thanks, Kahari. Yeah, I did just want to talk real quick about, something I mentioned on here a few times before, something we've been organizing around for a while. And that's, all the ongoing issues at the Allegheny County Jail, and the jail oversight boards, general efforts to be able to address some of those issues. So, as I talked about last week, we've been pushing really hard for County Executive Rich Fitzgerald, who's on the jail oversight board and has been, as county executive for his entire time in office, just to, simply just to attend one of the jail oversight board meetings, and continue to attend those meetings in the future. So we were pressing hard for that last week. He did not attend once again. And so, we're going to continue pushing. So I just wanted to get the word out, once again, that this is something we're going to continue to push on, for the reason that County Executive Rich Fitzgerald, he's on the jail oversight board, and he's in a unique position on that board, being that he's the elected official in Allegheny County who has, who's responsible for overseeing the jail and has, direct, control and influence to affect immediate change within the jail administration, within the operations of the jail. And it's especially crucial and important that he attends these meetings to allow the jail oversight board to do their job, to make sure that the jail administration is doing the job that they're supposed to be, and to make sure that we can correct, a lot of the ongoing issues and shortcomings and, abuses that are occurring at the jail that we've talked about on here a few times. So I just wanted to say, thank you everyone who signed the petition, shared around the open letter, help put up flyers and get the word out otherwise. And, this is something we'll be pushing for next month's jail oversight board meeting and just, organizing around this issue in general. So, thank you to everyone who's contributed to that so far.
Absolutely. And one thing I just wanted to add, because I do want to get into our first guest. This weekend, we are doing our GOTV rally. I just did want to plug that Saturday, May 15th from 2 to 6 at Garland Parklet, also known as Penley, Park in East Liberty, 299 North St. Clair. We're going to have, DJ, music, food, a whole, celebration. We're going to, we invited, candidates. So candidates far and wide, feel free to come. And meet folks on the Saturday, before the election. So, again, along with our kind of strategy, we try to reach out to young folks and the unlikely voters. And we know, those are the folks who haven't, voted by mail yet. They haven't applied to vote by mail, which another plug, we are reaching the deadline to apply for your vote by mail ballot. And if you do, within the next, 24 hours or so, decide to apply, online, and we'll put a link in to the state's vote by mail application. But again, that you're really, really playing it close. So that may not be the best way to go about it at this point if you haven't already applied to vote by mail. But by state law, you still can. So we'll definitely put a link to that. In the chat as well, for those who do need that. But if you do that, make sure you hit the drop box. I believe the drop boxes begin on Wednesday, the 12th, if I'm not mistaken, down at the county office building. We're coming down to the crunch time for real. And again, I just want to salute all the candidates. It takes a lot to run for office. That's why we'd really try to be so gracious when we work with the candidates on their questionnaires and just be real cool about it and thank them for coming on, our platforms and things like that. Because as the spouse of an elected official, I just know how nerve-wracking it is to step into the public arena, and it takes a lot of courage. So from that point of view, everybody's a winner, even though obviously everyone can't advance to hold the seat. But And I feel like everybody's a winner who decides to throw their hat into the ring, because it takes, a lot of courage, and you deal with a lot of stress, on the campaign trail. I've seen it. So with that, we'll go into our first guest, who is a candidate for the Commonwealth Court and is currently a sitting judge in Philadelphia. And we're just really excited to be able to have opportunity to introduce to folks here in Western Pennsylvania, Judge Lori Dumas, candidate for the Commonwealth Court. Welcome, Judge.
Hi, good evening.
Yeah, thank you so much for for joining us. So just jump in. Can you just tell us, a little bit about yourself, because we have a lot of folks, from Western PA that that watch, follow our platforms and watch the replay. So before we get any questions, I just want to give opportunity, being that you aren't from this neck of the woods, so folks can get an opportunity to know you better.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak to your audience, an audience that I haven't had an opportunity to meet a lot of. But I am Judge Lori Dumas. I am from Philadelphia. I am currently a Court of Common Pleas judge, which means I sit on our trial court level. And I've been sitting here in Philadelphia on our courts now for 19 years. And I've sat in every major trial division that there is. And I will tell you that I have really had a very rewarding experience on the bench, serving in many different capacities, serving the people, and really honing my skills, so that now that I am here and at this time seeking to move to another court, a higher court, I believe that I've prepared myself to do so. I am a mom, a wife, and I grew up with a mom who was tough as nails, didn't have an education, but made sure that her children understood the importance of education. But also, even with our limited means, because of that, she never, ever, she never stopped making sure that she and her children understood that we were responsible for our brothers. So yes, we are our brother's keepers, and she made sure that we understood the whole philosophy of giving back. And that's really what has undergirded my entire life, is resilience, hard work, determination, and serving my fellow man. And I've taken that to this bench, and I have served with honor, with dignity, with integrity. And for me, transitioning to this next level of court is just a natural progression of service. And so I'm happy to be here and to share with your audience. So thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. And Ron's going to start with a follow-up.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for breaking that down, providing a little background about yourself. So just at the closing of that point, you talked about how this is, you described it as like a natural progression of service from the Court of Common Pleas to the Commonwealth Court. So if you could just elaborate on that a little bit, talk about, what really was the driving motivation behind, you deciding to run for Commonwealth Court after having served on the Court of Common Pleas, if there was, any other factors that played a role in that.
Sure. So my professional investment really is seeing how the courts operate, understanding the areas of law, seeing people who, as individuals, came in front of me. They, were treated fairly, with dignity, but it's really seeing. I got the opportunity to sit on this court for almost 20 years and really understand what the needs of the people are. And although in my current position, I hear cases of, one particular entity or one person. And when I was in family court for 15 years, it was one child at a time and one family at a time. But all of those systems which impact the lives of those who come in front of me now and have over the past 19 years, I now have the opportunity in Commonwealth Court to impact those systems. So the educational system, the environmental systems, our economic system. So all of those things that really are at the root of why people end up in court, especially our children, especially people who are undereducated and people who don't have a lot of money, right? Hardworking, everyday people. And the reasons why they end up in court are some of, if not all of, the subject matter of the cases that I will be hearing in the Commonwealth Court. So to me, it was a natural fit. I've taken my time, I've honed my skills. I understand how people end up in court and fighting for their lives, for their children, for their property. And now I am going to a court that impacts all of those systems. And I think that, I'm assuming, and I believe that your audience is very aware of how systems truly impact us as individuals. Although we don't necessarily see that, we know that it's the systems. And when the systems are broken, so are our people.
Thank you for that point, and and that kind of brings a whole question that just came to my head. As you were saying that, given your background, being a sitting judge for 2 decades, what do you think can be done, in a way that you can say properly without obviously putting yourself, and not being able to look over a particular case, but from a systemic thing, I'll step back for 1 second just to bring some context, because one of the reasons why we're so focused, on these judicial races is there's always just so much fanfare around mayoral elections and gubernatorial elections, and presidential elections, and for someone as a sitting judge, and we often look at these other offices as ways to address systemic challenges. Can you talk just a little bit about as your experience as a judge, in a city like Philadelphia, that's diverse, that has a lot of different issues, and it's one of the largest cities in the country. Why are judges so important, to our process, and why should people be a lot more locked in, to this May 18th election, and what do you think judges can do to play their proper role, in those systemic issues that you talked about?
Thanks. That's a great question, Kahari. And what people don't understand is that when our legislators make law, like they create law, by passing, they're passing them by passing laws. They go through the whole process, and to ensure that they have supposedly taken into consideration, all of the needs of their constituents when they are creating these laws. But there's always some gray areas. There are always some issues with legislation that are going to need the buy-in or the weigh-in, if you will, of the court. Because when people don't agree about what the words say and what the words mean in the laws, they have to go to court in order to resolve those conflicts. And so, although you have, the branches of government that, the legislative branch and executive branch, and they're creating these laws that we're supposed to follow, it's the courts that actually determine whether or not our actions are in accordance with the law. And so we, in essence, are interpreting the laws. And for people who are interpreting the laws, I would think that people would understand that it's not the law itself, but it's the interpretation of that law, which is going to impact your lives, no matter what, whether it be in a criminal case, a civil case, a family court case, everything that is a part of who we are and our environment and our work and our economy involves laws and regulations. And it's the courts that determine what is as it relates to the law. And so we have to know the people that we are putting on these courts, because when there are all of these gray areas in the law, it's who that judge is on the inside that really determines what happens in those gray areas. And if you don't know these people you're putting on the bench, if you've not done your research, if you don't understand the values and belief systems that inform those judges' decisions, and you have to stand in front of one too many times and way too often. And I've seen it, I've experienced it, and I have seen people who didn't know who judges were until they stood in front of one. And when they got there and they got the decision, they wanted to say, well, where did they come from? These judges are voted in. And too often people don't understand that. I will say that as it relates to this particular court, there is a lot more attention paid to this court in particular, which, mind you, is the only court of its kind in the United States. There's no other Commonwealth court in the United States. And this court was actually carved out of the Dauphin court, out of their court system. And they changed the Constitution. They carved out this little court, and all of the governmental cases go to this court. So everything that's regulated in Pennsylvania goes to this court. So when we talk about, educational funding and the formulas that are used as it relates to what our children need in order to get the education they deserve, our healthcare systems, our environmental issues, our elections. This court was the only court that gave Trump his only victory in the last election. And if that decision had stood, 2.5 million voices in Pennsylvania would have been silenced. And our White House may look different today. And so that's why judges matter. Judges decide where, if you keep your property, where you can live, if in a domestic situation, who's going to keep the house, who's going to keep the kids, who's going to pay what, in a worker's situation, workers' comp, was the injury related, to the job, because if not, the person can't recover. I mean, there's so many issues that courts handle, and people, and even if you never stand in front of one, the decisions that come out of this court, if a person in Pennsylvania never ever had to stand in front of a judge themselves, the decisions that come out of this court will impact their lives and their households, even though they weren't a part of the case. Why do I say that? Let's take education, for example. Decisions that come out of this court that may have been filed by Allegheny school systems or school districts, when those cases go to this court, the judges make decisions which not only impact Allegheny County, it impacts the structure of funding for every school in the Commonwealth. So we have to do better. We have to investigate. We have to fact check, because there are a lot of people who just, judges aren't politicians. We aren't supposed to get up and lie about our experience and what we've done and what we believe. We're not politicians. And I'm not saying that that's what politicians do. But what I'm saying is that we are held to a standard of ethical responsibility. So what we say to the public about who we are and what we've done and what we stand for, that has to be the truth. How do you know that? We've got to fact check. We've got to make sure that these people who are going to be sitting in these seats for at least 10 years, impacting lives for at least 10 years, that what they're saying is true. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm getting a little heated over here. I feel like I'm preaching a little bit.
That's good.
But I just, it's the not knowing and the people that just kind of rely on everybody else to tell them who, what, where, as it relates to these judges in particular. And I will only speak about judicial races. We need to encourage people to get the information for themselves. And if it's something that they don't understand, then seek, maybe somebody else's, advice, maybe. But we have to make sure that we know who are going on these courts. You can see this court in particular is a court that's not balanced. There are no Black people on this court. There are no people of color on this court. The court is 7-2, Republican heavy. And I realize that your audience may be a mixed audience, and that's fine. But there's no way that this court can be fair, balanced, or just when all of the decisions are so lopsided. We have to have diverse courts throughout our system so that the decisions make sense, that everybody has an opportunity to hear the other side and then make an informed decision about what is right.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that statement. So kind of just, following up on what you're talking about, with the wide ranging, impact and influence that, these judges have statewide. And just, that real urgency for people to be able to understand for themselves who they're voting for these positions, those belief systems and values that inform, their work as judges on these courts. How, in your opinion, what's the best way? Like, how should people be going about, finding out about these candidates? What should they be looking for in a judicial candidate? Whether it be certain qualities, types of experience, things like that. Just how should people really go about, becoming informed on, really who they should be voting for these positions?
So of course you start with the systems that impact the election. So you have the Bar Association, you have, different endorsing organizations, but I encourage people not to stop there. If you have an opportunity to reach out and touch some people that have appeared before that judge, people who may know the judge and know the judge's background, or know the judge a little better than what the professionals have said, that judge stands for. That's important, right? That is definitely important. But you want to know that, you're getting information from a source that is pure and that is genuine, doesn't have an axe to grind, or is not in a situation where they kind of have to go along to get along, and they have to, basically stand behind someone that they don't even know. So while we have a lot of different community resources that, give everybody, like you guys, scorecards about judges, make sure you receive information from a wide variety of places, right? And see if the information is consistent. Because you may have, depending on where you are and where you're getting your information, you may have information that is really one-sided and not as open or honest, or transparent. So you need to know, and you have to do it in a way where, once you get the information, see if it makes sense. Sometimes, you listen to judges and they talk about their experience, and you kind of, you can even do the math and see that sometimes stuff doesn't even add up. But I would just suggest that outside of the formal information that we receive through endorsing agencies, there may be someone, Facebook connects. You can see the connections on Facebook that people have. Judges are connected. There may be somebody that they're connected with on Facebook that because you really want to know that what they're saying is true, right? You want to know, because once they're in, they're in, as I said, for at least 10 years. And the lives that can be impacted in a 10-year period, I know that I have touched in almost 20 years thousands and thousands of lives. And though I don't take that lightly, I take it as an honor and a privilege. But I knew that I need to make sure that I was right, so that my decisions would be right, because what I said and what I wrote was going to impact these lives for a very, very long time. And we need judges who understand that. We need judges who are prepared, who are passionate about people, and who want to get it right, and will do whatever is necessary to prepare themselves to make sure that they're making decisions that are for the people and no other reason.
Now, thank you so much for that. And before you leave and we move to our next guest, can you just tell folks how they can get in touch with your campaign and find out more information about you?
Sure. So I'm on Facebook and there we are. At Judge Dumas, Facebook and Twitter, IG at Friends of Judge Dumas, and my website is judgedumas2021.com. Your staff is the bomb.
Thank you.
We got all that straightened out before I came on, so thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, Judge Lori Dumas from Philadelphia, a sitting judge with the Court of Common Pleas and a current candidate for Commonwealth Court in the state of Pennsylvania. Thank you so much for joining us. We definitely look forward to following you over the next week, and the best of luck. So that was a great start to our appellate court conversation. We're going to bring in another fantastic candidate, Jill Beck. Welcome. Oh, Jill's not here. I'm sorry. Okay, I apologize with that. Okay, so we is Mr. Brian Neff still backstage? I apologize to the viewers.
I'm here.
Okay, and I apologize to Jill as well. Jill will be joining us. I will take the hit for that. It's like, it's like Little League. You bat out of order, it's automatic out. That comes from I'm a Little League baseball coach with a lot of experience, so I use a lot of those metaphors. So we are joined by Attorney Brian Neff, who is a candidate for Superior Court, and we're very, very excited to have you. Really enjoyed reading about you, reading from your responses to the questionnaire, and all the work that you've done. But could you just take a few minutes just to introduce yourself, in your own words, and why you're running for this office, and a little bit about your background that makes you qualify for the position?
So my name is Brian Neff. I am from Allegheny County, and I am running for judge of the Pennsylvania Superior Court. I'm a lifelong Pittsburgher. My family, I'm fourth generation Pittsburgher. It's funny, there are a lot of different stories I tell when I kind of give my stump speech. And the first one is about my great grandfather. He came over here from Eastern Europe at the turn of the last century and started a trucking company in Pittsburgh's Hill District with nothing more than a push cart and a blind horse. And he turned that into a thriving regional trucking company. And he gave it over to my grandfather even before I was born. But he wasn't happy sitting around in retirement. He wanted to get back on the trucks. He wanted to make deliveries and pick up shipments and meet with his customers. And his shop was unionized, and they said to him, "Pap," they called him Pap, you can't do this. You're not a member of the union. He said, "Make me a member of the union." And they did. They voted him in as a member of the Teamsters Local 249. And I tell that story because you often hear about labor becoming management, but you never hear the other way around of management becoming labor. But it's a real testament to, the values that I was brought up with: values of fairness, values of mutuality, values working, for the greater good so that everybody could succeed. And it talks about my work ethic, which is that, I wouldn't ask anybody to do something I wasn't willing to do myself. And that means lots of hard work, especially being a judge of the Pennsylvania Superior Court. The other thing I tell everybody is that my inspiration for going to law school was my mom. She beat me to law school by 5 years. She decided when I was in high school that she was going to give up her career as a home economics teacher and become a lawyer. And I got to see her in the classroom setting, and she had study groups at our house. And I really got hooked on the law just by watching that bantering back and forth about arguing over cases and everything. And it's really a great run. My mom still practices law today, and we get on the phone occasionally and we talk about the issues that we're grappling with. And it's been a really gratifying experience in that regard. I've been practicing now for 31 years, and I've done almost every type of case that's gone before the Superior Court I've seen during my practice. And I practiced in front of the Superior Court, as well as the Commonwealth Court, as well as the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So I know appellate practice like the back of my hand. But just as importantly, and I say this all the time, a judge is first and foremost a public servant. But a judge also needs to be a role model and a leader in the community. And I've been a leader. I've done a lot of work in the legal profession, working in the judicial system, with judges and other practitioners to improve the profession of law, to improve the judiciary, and to improve access to justice, meaning that people that need help in court get the help they need. And that's what makes me an effective candidate and best candidate for Superior Court.
Thank you for that. We're going to move to Ryan for a follow-up.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for the backgrounds. Talking about your work, your motivations for joining that line of work. Yes, you talked about the type of experience you would bring to the Superior Court. So in addition to already having done that type of work for a long time, what really is your driving force, your primary motivation for deciding to run for this position?
So I've always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to be a judge. I clerked for a Superior Court judge back when I first started practicing back in the early 1990s, and I clerked for my judge, Bill Sircone, for 4 years. Doing all the types of appeals that come before that court. And I drafted hundreds of decisions for Judge Sircone on all of those types of cases. And I really loved the work that I was doing. It's work where you get to research case law and you research precedent and you spend time with the record that's developed in the court down below. And you determine, based upon the facts that are developed down below, based on the law that you have, whether there's been an error in the lower court proceedings and whether that error affected the outcome of the case. And so, I'm well versed in how to do that. I think the reason that I've decided that I want to do this now, I've done a lot of work, and like I said, to try to improve the profession of law, to try to improve access to justice, and to try to improve the judicial system. And with all of that in mind, I think I can come to this court and really effectuate some improvements in terms of getting people representation they need, in terms of getting the workload done at the Superior Court, and I'm ready to do this.
No, thank you for that. You one of the things you just said in your comments was like access to justice, and and reading your response to our questionnaire, you talked about the work that you've done around diversity, and the bar, and promoting equity, access. Can you talk a little bit about what you've done and why you think it's so important, not just for you, because it seems like it's a motivating factor for you, but again, like you said, in the pursuit of making the legal system better?
Everybody's entitled to the same thing when they come to court. They're entitled to a full and fair opportunity to have their case heard, and they're entitled to full and fair access to the judicial system. It shouldn't be a situation where somebody who has money can get access to the judicial system, but somebody that doesn't can't. And it's a fundamental fairness that needs to occur in the judicial system. And when I say access to justice, it's a very broad thing. A lot of people can't afford an attorney, so that's a means of obstructing access to justice. People may not have transportation to get to court. That's also an obstacle to access to justice. You talk about bias in the profession of law and in the judiciary. That's clearly an obstacle to access to justice. We had in Allegheny County last year a judge that resigned after he, made overtly racial statements about members of a jury that was handling a case that he was involved in. And in this day and age, you can't have that. So we've done a lot of work in the Bar Association to educate the members of our bar and our judiciary on implicit bias. When I was president of the Bar Association, we implemented a program where every single continuing legal education class that the Bar Association put on that was approved for judges to take had an implicit bias component in it. We all have implicit biases. We all know we have implicit biases, and we have to be educated enough to know how to get around those so they're not impacting what we're doing. So it's much needed because everybody is entitled to equal access to the courts. And, like I said, you won't get that if you're dealing with issues of bias.
Ron, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thanks, Kahari. I just wanted to ask about, just kind of for some elaboration on one of the comments from that you had on our questionnaire, actually. And it was dealing with a question, talking about alternatives to incarceration in certain instances. And you said that you support alternatives to incarceration in appropriate cases. And so I just wanted to ask, what sort of factors you would consider there, how you would really define appropriate case, just all the different things that would factor into that.
So I guess I need to preface it by at least saying that, I can't comment on how I would rule on a particular case that comes up. It's just not something we're allowed to do. But, there are things that happen in our justice system that, can be a means to minimize incarceration, such as alternative disposition programs, diversionary courts. And I'm all for that because I think that, there are ways, when you look at an individual that may be before the court on a criminal matter of some sort, that you can take into account their personal situation and, find them resources to become a productive member of society if they're having problems. And that's what diversionary courts tend to do. There are also what we call the accelerated rehabilitative disposition programs that exist for various types of criminal matters, and those can be successful too in making sure that somebody gets out of the system without having that criminal record. So those are the types of things that we should have. But again, it's a balancing act, and there are factors that need to be considered about whether somebody is, appropriate for that type of program. So I think when I say that, in appropriate circumstances, it really depends on the individual case. At the appellate level, that's not something that would be done, because the appellate level really is just determining whether or not there was error in the court down below. And the appellate court really needs to take a very hard look at cases that come in, where sentencing is involved, to make sure that, every I is dotted and every T is crossed, and to make sure that the rights of the individual are protected.
And absolutely, if I could, just ask, kind of a technical question. It's one thing that we like to do, on our platform, is be civically minded and educate, folks, and maybe, we get maybe a little too wonky, but for our viewers, could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think, sometimes voters get a little frustrated, and they think that there's like an avoidance, kind of thing. But can you talk about why people that are running for judge, why is there certain questions they can't answer? Coming directly from a candidate, because I think sometimes people don't understand how you fall into a different category than someone running for governor, or someone running for senator, or someone running for mayor, where they have a little bit more, whereas in some cases, a lot more wiggle room to talk about, what they would do, or how they would, govern or preside.
No, it's a great question. And, we have Judge Dumas talked about this when she was speaking, but we have judicial canons that we have to follow. And it basically means we can't make promises about how we would rule in a particular case. We can't, talk about policy issues, because the judiciary is not a policy making body. What it does is it, takes the laws that we have and applies them to the facts of cases. And so, when you're looking at who should be judged and who shouldn't be judged, you really have to look at their record to determine, I'm almost reading between the lines and saying, do I like what this person kind of has stood for his entire life? And do I think that person would be, fair and equitable in handling cases? And quite honestly, the public shouldn't want to know how a judge would rule on something, because that goes against, and anything that you would expect, from a judge to be fair and impartial. But it really goes to, one, the independence of the judiciary, making sure that the judiciary is free to make whatever decisions it needs to, but it's all based on the facts that the attorneys present down below and the arguments that they make on the law. It's not a policy making body so that you can say, I like this policy or I like that policy. We just don't do that. We have to make lots of decisions that we may never agree with as a policy matter, but the law requires us to follow the rule of law, the statutes as they're written, and the precedent that the Supreme Court and then the intermediate appellate courts give us. I don't know if I adequately answered your question, Gary, so I want to make sure that I did. But one of the things I wanted to tell you, we've got a legislature, and they're the ones that make the laws. And it's a majoritarian system, which is why, we had, a big fight where we have 50 senators from one party, 50 senators from another, the vice president breaks the tie and all that kind of stuff. But the court, in a sense, is what we call a counter-majoritarian institution. It's there to sort of counter majority overreach when it occurs. So when you have constitutional rights of individuals, the court is, must apply them when those rights are at issue. But again, it's got to be based upon the facts that are presented to the court at any given time. So when you have a trial that takes place at the common pleas level, and whether it's a plaintiff case, a defense case, each side makes their arguments, each side presents evidence, each side, makes closing arguments, and then either a jury or a judge may decide, the application of the law to the facts of that case. And then when it goes up on appeal, the appellate court looks to see whether or not that record is adequate to support the verdict, whether there were any errors that affected the outcome of the case. And that's limited to, like I said, a review of the record, a review of the law, and listening to the arguments of the parties. But you want that fairness and impartiality and the independence for the court to be able to do that job.
So I just wanted to pass it to Ron for a final question before we go to our next guest.
Yep. Thanks, Kahari. Yeah, so I just wanted to ask broadly, obviously not dealing with any specific policy or type of case or anything like that, but just what would some of your general priorities, as far as your judicial philosophy or the impact you would like to have if elected, what are some of your priorities if elected to this position?
I think the priorities would again be to make the judicial system as efficient as possible. I think that I'm the type of person that is going to come in and make sure that the rights of the individuals that are coming before the court are adequately protected. We talk about rights, very loosely, but you're talking about things that the Superior Court deals with, such as Fourth Amendment rights to unreasonable searches and seizures. That's something that comes before the Superior Court. We talk about rights to, of due process, that the government can't come in and take something from you without due process of law. And those are all individual rights that that need to be protected at the end of the day. And I'd like to think that I'm going to take a really hard look at all of the cases that come up to make sure those rights are protected for everybody that comes to the court, because you want somebody that's going to take that close eye and to do the hard work of deciding the issues that come up based upon the record that exists.
Thank you so much. And for those who are just joining us, we've been talking to Brian Neff, an attorney from the Pittsburgh area who is currently running for Pennsylvania Superior Court, and you can see his contacts below. I don't know if you want to say anything else, Brian, before you leave, about how folks can get in contact with your campaign, beyond your website, or if there's a phone number or email or anything like that you want to share.
Yeah, I mean, my web address is brianneft.com, BRYANNEFT.com. You can reach me at brian@brianneff.com, and I'll answer your emails. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have. But know this, and I think Judge Dumas said this too, there's a lot of information out there about the candidates running for these positions. The Pennsylvania Bar Association evaluated all of the candidates for Superior Court, and they have questionnaires that we filled out, lengthy questionnaires that go through our history and go through our background. And I invite the listeners here to go to the Pennsylvania Bar Association's Judicial Evaluation Commission website and read that information, and you can get a sense from there about what the candidates are all about. There's a lot of information out there. There are other forums that we've done that are on YouTube, that are on Facebook. Invite you to spend time listening to those, because you really can make informed decisions about the candidates. And I hope that you do, and I hope you all get out on election day to vote.
Thank you so much. And again, Brian Neff, attorney Brian Neff from the greater Pittsburgh area, and also a candidate for Pennsylvania Superior Court. Thank you so much for a great conversation. Good luck on the trail for the last week. We look forward to being in touch.
Thank you. It was great. I love being here.
Thank you so much. Again, that was Brian Neff. I'm really enjoying this, Ryan, talking to these, very incredibly qualified, intellectual, folks. And, as a layman, it's kind of fun, to talk legalese, with our folks who just had, these incredible careers. So now we're going to go to our next guest, Jill Beck, also another candidate for Superior Court who's on the move. And we often do this. We often have guests on the move. So thank you so much for joining us while on the move. It's like super crazy time, campaigning. So, before we jump into it, like we did with our other guests, want to give you an opportunity just to introduce yourself, where you're from, why you're running, for Superior Court, and what special, qualities you bring to the table.
Sure. Well, thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Jill Beck. I am from Allegheny County. I live in the city of Pittsburgh with my husband and 2 kids, and I'm running for Superior Court. The Superior Court is the Court of Appeals. It's a statewide court that whenever somebody loses a trial, they have the right to challenge that decision up to the Superior Court. And it's the criminal, civil, family, juvenile, and orphans court matters that the Superior Court hears. And those are all areas where I practiced and represented clients. I have largely dedicated my career to public service, representing abuse and neglected children at Kids Voice, representing victims of domestic violence through neighborhood legal services and Women's Center and Shelter, helping people without money get the same rights and protections as people who do. I've done that on both the civil and the criminal side. I have done that in trial courts and in appellate courts across the country. I have done election protection work, research and advisory work for a number of nonprofits, including Ceasefire PA. And I have, I care very deeply about marginalized and vulnerable members of our population. I have tried over 1,400 cases in courts under the Superior Court's jurisdiction. I've practiced in the Superior Court itself, filing and defending appeals. And I spent 10 years on the other side of the bench in the chambers of Christine Donahue, where I drafted over 500 decisions of the very kind that I'll decide when elected to that court. For me, this is about equitable and equal access to justice. It doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, how you pray, who you love, what you're alleged to have done, or how much money you make. You get the same level of review and the same level of justice as anybody else. These are the principles by which I have built my practice. This is the way I've lived my life, treating everyone with kindness and respect. And these are the principles and the values that I will bring with me to the court. I've been highly recommended to be a Superior Court judge by the Allegheny County Bar Association. The Pennsylvania Bar Association has also recommended me for the job. I know the court, I know the law. I am really passionate about the work. I look forward to your questions, and I thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We're going to go to Ryan for a follow-up.
Yep. Thanks, Kahari. Thanks, Jill. So I just wanted to ask about, you talked about all the work you've done over the years, advocating for different, marginalized people, survivors of domestic violence and abuse, things like that. Just the importance of equity and justice for, everybody across all of those different groups. If elected to the Superior Court, what could you really do in that role? What aspects of that position, how would you use that position to advocate for those groups and just the equity that you talked about?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that a Superior Court judge can do, so, the Superior Court is an error-correcting court. And it's not so simple just to say, oh, what would I have done if I was in the shoes of the trial court? How would I have decided this differently? You are looking at these cases through a very narrow lens to decide whether they are legally supportable. And that's kind of a nuanced distinction, but it's an important distinction because it requires a very careful review of the record, a very thorough research of the law, and a drafting of the decision that is, succinct, but also, ties those facts in to the law to make sure that substantial justice is achieved. Too often it is far easier to just rubber stamp a decision of the court below, but I view that as an abdication of the role that I am seeking. It is the job of the Superior Court judge to ensure a very thorough review of the record and to ensure a very careful research of the law. And that is the best way to protect people, to give every single person who comes into the court an even playing field, the same level of justice, as I said, because I think that more often than not, that's all people are looking for is a fair shake. And that is what I think a Superior Court judge can do. You can bring them substantial justice just by giving them a full, fair, and thorough review of their matter.
Right. And again, with the spirit, of so much what we try to do on this platform, it's civic education, and not just have, necessarily a political conversation, but get beyond that, and get into the information. So similar to, a question that I asked Brian, and Neff earlier, but from a different point of view, I know that, during, the racial reckoning last year and the protests and things like that, you were involved, with protecting, protesters. And I'm not saying that, as kind of a, like a political alley-oop or anything like that for those who, have an affinity for folks who, who are out protesting. But could you just talk a little bit why you got involved? But then also, to me, the bigger thing is, why is it important, for everyone to be able to have legal representation? just from a larger sense of having, a good, legal system. So you talk just a little bit about your personal experience of doing that work. And then from a larger aspect, regardless of what you agree of what that person did, or how great you think the thing that person did, or how, diabolical you think they did, why all people need, legal representation, regardless of how you feel about whatever activity they were involved in.
Sure, absolutely. Look, rights are there for a reason, and they need to be protected. I always have said, if someone is guilty of a crime, then that is the prosecutor's role to prove it. That is their burden. It's innocent until proven guilty. And if the evidence is there, then that shouldn't be a problem. As far as my work during the protests of last summer, I think like many people, after the murder of George Floyd, people felt very powerless. There wasn't much to be done, and there were protests happening in the streets, and I wanted to try to help and do more for people who were exercising their First Amendment right to protest, peacefully protesting in the street, something that they disagreed with. And that is something that is, staunchly and carefully protected by our Constitution. I apologize, I'm about to go into a tunnel. Hold on. And I knew that the Public Defender's Office was going to be overrun with cases. And so, putting together my desire to do something and my law firm's desire to help, I spoke with many people in my office who were similarly wanting to help. We developed a partnership with our Public Defender's Office and to help with that representation. There was a lot of evidence that was coming in, a lot of photographic and video evidence, and that takes up a lot of storage space, which I, correctly believe the Public Defender's Office did not really have. And so we were going to help collect and synthesize and store some of this evidence. And, we would help second chair those trials where needed. Again, if somebody does something wrong and they're guilty, then they're guilty, and they will be proven guilty by the evidence and by the prosecution. But they do have they have a Fifth Amendment right to counsel, they have a Sixth Amendment right to counsel, they have a First Amendment right to protest. It is the obligation of the legal community to stand next to these people and just provide a defense. And that was what we wanted to help do, given the sheer volume of cases that were going to be coming into the Public Defender's Office. We wanted to make sure that we were able to help with that. As to your second question about the need for legal representation for all people, you wouldn't want to go into a sporting event not knowing the rules. And I sort of see it that way. Having people go into court unrepresented, it's like throwing them into a game without knowing how to play. And I think that more than ever, people need help just navigating this process. Another project that I did, I spearheaded another pro bono initiative with Neighborhood Legal Services, our local civil legal aid organization, to help those people who fall into that giant chasm of folks who cannot afford an attorney, but also are not entitled to pro bono, to free legal representation. And we took, maybe the top 10 types of civil proceedings that Neighborhood Legal Services saw people needing representation for, asking for advice, and we made legal fact sheets, one-pagers, bullet points at a 4th or 5th grade reading level, just to explain what people were going to be walking into so they could go in with some knowledge. We also drafted a few sample motions that they could fill in so that they could go into court prepared. Because I think that is half the battle sometimes. They've been wronged in some way, they need help, they just have to know how to do it. And some of these, the civil legal aid organizations often are really overrun and just don't have the ability to take on all the clients and cases that they'd like to. Again, some people just fall into that middle income bracket where they just cannot afford an attorney, but also don't get an attorney. And so everybody should be able to go into court and get substantial justice achieved, even if they are unrepresented. But having an attorney there, it's critical. It allows people to get their case heard in a way that judges will hear.
Ryan, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Kahari. I wanted to bring up one of the questions from one of our organizational partners that was submitted for this episode, and it deals with ensuring that residents that don't speak English are given the same opportunities, the same access to justice as everyone else in the courtroom. They talk about in the question how language access means more than just assuring their interpreters in the courtrooms, and there's a lot of other barriers that can prevent non-native English speakers and non-fluent English speakers from getting that same access to justice. So along those lines, does that fall at all under the role of a Superior Court judge? Is there anything that a Superior Court judge can do to advocate for that equal access in that regard?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. And I will tell you that it was during my tenure in Justice Donahue's chambers on the Supreme Court that the language access plan was finally passed in Pennsylvania. I'd say Pennsylvania was a little late to the party there, but because it used to be that people would walk into court and have to somehow communicate what language they spoke without speaking English or having a shared language with the person they were trying to communicate with. Now we have posters that are called I Speak, and they can walk up and just point to the language on the poster that they speak in order to be able to at least start that kind of communication process and get some information in a language that they can understand. And, as far as what the Superior Court can do, I mean, we are an error-correcting court. We are a court that, if we see, if somebody challenges the fact that they were not fully represented because, their attorney did not speak the language, or that their interpreter was not giving them good interpretation, or that their rights were somehow violated by the fact that English was not their first language. I mean, that is error that can be corrected by the court in given factual scenario. Of course, it would be determined, of course, by the facts, but there's Supreme Court precedent on that very issue. A criminal defendant in that case was denied effective assistance of counsel because English was not his first language. His counsel knew that. They did not secure an interpreter for him, and for that reason, he was subject to retrial. And so, that is the law in Pennsylvania that is to be applied. I think that there is a lot, again, in the review that the Superior Court can do to try to right that wrong.
Right. And thank you so much for that. And in one final question, I would definitely be interested to get your perspective, point of view. I've been asking some of the the other guests as well. If you could just talk a little bit just from your perspective of, again, why these positions are so important. Again, when there's presidential campaigns and senatorial campaigns and campaigns for Congress and things like that, there's a lot of fanfare. But one can argue that these positions affect daily lives in much more real ways. So could you just talk a little bit more about someone who, like you said, is argued in front of the Superior Court's clerked at the state Supreme Court, again, from just your own personal perspective, how important are these appellate offices and why people should spend the next 6-7 days getting to know the various candidates, and if they haven't sent their mail ballot in, making sure they know as much as they can before they walk into the booth on May 18th.
Yeah, no, Kahari, you are speaking my language. This is so critical, and it's unfortunate because I think our judicial system is complicated, and it makes it very difficult for people to know and to understand the nuances between candidates. These positions are very important, though. For the Superior Court, for example, these are decisions that affect someone's right to freedom, their right to parent their children, their right to their health, their wealth, their safety, their inheritance, their business, their property. And it's interpreting the laws of our Commonwealth and our Constitution. So at a broad-based level, of course, we want to see everybody get fair, equal, and equitable treatment by the courts. And so for those directly involved, we want to know that the judges who are sitting there are going to do the job well, put in the time, effort, and energy to do the job right. But from a more personal standpoint, these cases do involve people who are not the litigants in the case, because these laws in our Constitution apply to all of us. And so a law that didn't affect you yesterday might affect you tomorrow, because the law has now been interpreted in a different way. And so you want to be sure that, the person making that decision is going to do it right. The other piece of this is the Superior Court is the court of last resort for about 97 or 98% of cases that come before it. The Supreme Court is really not equipped, nor is it the proper court to do error correction. It grants allowance of appeal in Superior Court cases by its discretion, and it does so only in cases really involving situations that have never been decided before, issues that really, finally implicate Pennsylvania constitutional law, or, broader public policy issues. So for the, quote unquote, run of the mill criminal case or custody case or dependency matter or will interpretation, the Supreme Court is not going to be granting allowance of appeal in the great majority of those cases. And so the Superior Court's got to get it right. It's got to get it right the first time. And I can tell you firsthand, having reviewed these cases and worked on these cases in the Supreme Court, it was one of my greatest frustrations and one of my biggest motivations to run was seeing the Supreme Court's inability to grant allowance of appeal on cases that were wrongly decided and would have to be left to stand. And so, it is my desire to be the kind of judge who's going to sit there, who's going to, again, put in the time, effort, and energy to do the job well, to do the job right. And I do know this job. I know this court inside and out from both sides of the bench. And I cannot stress how important that is, because the Superior Court is also the busiest court in the country. It decided last year approximately 8,000 decisions. And these are people, this is affecting people's lives, their daily lives, day in and day out. So we want to make sure that we're doing this and that we get the best people we can sitting in these seats.
Thank you so much for that. And before you go, because I know you're on the move, so thank you so much for joining us while you were on the move. Could you just share with us beyond what's at the bottom of the screen? How else can folks get in touch with your campaign? There's an email address, phone number, or whatever.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear from you. The best way to reach us is our general email account. It's info@jillbeck.com. Reach out to us. We are canvassing. We are phone banking. We are doing yard signs. We're doing it all. We'd love to hear from you. I'd love to answer any questions you may have that I can answer. We'd love to have you volunteer. Facebook Messenger, I know it is down there too. It's another great way to reach us. We are trying to answer every question that comes through. We're getting a lot of great messages from voters and from folks, and we welcome hearing from you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. That's Jill Beck, candidate for Pennsylvania Superior Court. Good luck, and looking forward to following you over the next week or so. And thank you again for joining us. We'll be in touch soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Take care, Kahari and Ryan. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Again, that was Jill Beck, a candidate for Superior Court. And before we go to our next guest, I do just want to acknowledge that Judge Tamika Lane and as well as Judge Maria McLaughlin are backstage waiting, but they do have in-person events. So hopefully we will be able to get with them. And but now we're going to go to our next guest who's backstage. It's Allegheny County Court Pleas Judge David Spurgeon.
Well, good evening, everyone. Good to see you.
Yeah, how you doing, Judge?
I'm good, Kahari. Nice
Awesome.
to see you, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. You too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So full disclosure, I've known Judge Spurgeon for years, and we're personal friends. So I don't want anybody to think that there's any subterfuge going on or anything. It's a fully fair process, but I've known Judge Spurgeon for years, so I can't treat him like a stranger tonight. So welcome to the platform, and thank you for joining us. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running and the qualifications that you bring to the table?
Absolutely. So I am Judge David Spurgeon. I have been on the bench for the last 5 years. I was appointed by Governor Wolf and then had to run for my own term in 2017. So I've been serving for the last 5 years in the family division. And in the family division, I primarily focus on the juvenile section where I deal with any issue pertaining to family, but the vast majority of issues with children. I have a huge foster care docket that I deal with. And I also preside in the orphans court when I deal with termination of parental rights and other things that happen as a result of the foster care system. I have made some real efforts in the last 5 years. I have been named a National Judicial Fellow while there. I've been there for my judicial leadership, taking on some of the systems issues and trying to advance some of the flaws that we saw in the system and trying to be an advocate nationally for that. Prior to that, I spent almost 19 years in the DA's office. I will be the first person to tell you I did not plan on going and staying there. I went there to get some trial experience because I was somebody who went to college and law school and ended up with a lot of student loans. So I thought if I would get some good trial experience, I'd be able to go somewhere where I'd make some money so I could pay them all back. But what happened is I ended up falling in love with public service. And I fell in love with public service because I saw it as an opportunity to do many things that I could leave an imprint on the system and leave it better than I found it. And some of the reasons I stuck around was I became a passionate advocate for our problem-solving courts. I became either the creator or supervisor of our mental health court unit and veterans court, where we saw people with underlying issues that we knew that people were getting involved in the criminal justice system. And it was almost like a revolving door, but we weren't treating the underlying issue. And sometimes that was mental health, sometimes that was drugs and alcohol, or sometimes it was post-traumatic stress disorder or traumatic brain injury for our veterans, where we were seeing this and we weren't addressing the underlying issue. And when we address the underlying issue, we actually realized that we were making better results for people. Veterans Court, when I left that office, had like a 92% success rate, and that's because it was so individualized. The same thing with mental health court, had such a success rate because we individualized it. There were some people that needed court intervention every week. There were some people every month, some people 4 times a year. And by individualizing it, we were able to give people the better service that they needed and not treat everybody as a name or a number on a file. The other reason I probably stuck around is because I became the lead prosecutor for our county in cases of domestic violence. So I was the person that was handling cases where it was typically women, 94% of the time, women or children that were physically or sexually abused or murdered by somebody who told them that they loved them or they had a family relationship with. I became an national expert in the area of domestic violence. In fact, a couple of months ago, I was actually on Court TV as a legal analyst talking about the pandemic and how we see the numbers of child abuse and domestic violence not being reported, but we know during the quarantine, the pandemic, and the stress that those numbers were actually on the rise. And that's why I stayed so long. I thought that I was making an impact and I was making some systems changes while I was there that I thought was making a good impact for all of Allegheny County. I'm proud to say that in this race for Commonwealth Court, there are people running. I am the only top-rated candidate by the Pennsylvania Bar Association of highly recommended for both parties. And, that means a lot to me because I'm a guy that grew up in the city of McKeesport that went to McKeesport Area High School. And I was talking to a group of McKeesport students not too long ago who sometimes, feel a little insecure about where they come from or their background and said, just so you know, the top-rated candidate for appellate court is somebody who's sat in the same seats that you sat in. So you can do anything. You have the ability to do anything that you want to do given the right opportunities. So I'm very excited to be highly recommended. I have been excited to be endorsed by the state Democratic Party for Commonwealth Court, as well as being the endorsed Labor candidate. So I'm running for Commonwealth Court because I think that we need some new perspectives on Commonwealth Court. And those perspectives are something that I believe I bring a unique perspective coming from a working class family in the Mon Valley. And I know Kahari knows this, but I am the only judge out of 43 judges in Allegheny County that actually lives in the Mon Valley. And that was something that we didn't have that perspective on the bench for a very long time. It's been 30 years since a judge had been elected from the Mon Valley, and I've sat at tables with other judges who are my colleagues. And, they've made statements where I've had to correct them. Like, for example, there was once the judge talking about why doesn't this kid just get a job at Dollar General and pay their court costs? And I had to interrupt and say, well, Judge, in the community that I grew up in, and I still reside in that same school district and chose to build a house there. The community that I grew up in, kids don't work at Dollar General, parents work at Dollar General. So you can't be so cavalier in saying, why doesn't the kid just get a job there? And I think that's a unique perspective that I bring to the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas bench. And I think it's a unique perspective that the Commonwealth Court desperately needs.
Yeah, I appreciate that that insight, talking about that perspective. And another thing you mentioned, related to that, along those same lines on your questionnaire, was also serving on the ACBA Diversity Committee, and working to address inequities, in the justice system through that. And so, I just wanted to ask, how having that unique perspective, and bringing that perspective to the bench and to, the Commonwealth Court, will really, combine with that and really help, serve that cause of addressing those inequities in the courtroom.
Well, I think first of all, people have to realize that the system is flawed. That's the first thing. We talk about this system, and I think the first step for anybody that's going to try to make change is realize that it's flawed. It is based on, we've created a judicial system that is based for people with a certain socioeconomic status. And, coming from a diverse background, I grew up in, as I said, in McKeesport when the steel industry was king, and my dad was a union guy who made a good living. But then I watched our entire world collapse when the steel mills collapsed. And I saw people that were doing things that maybe they wouldn't have done in the past because they were trying to struggle to see for opportunity and just to get ahead. And because of that, we have a system that is based upon people not understanding the criminal justice system, not understanding the court system. And if you are representing yourself or you're trying to navigate yourself through that system, I think that it's important that we have those diverse backgrounds and those diverse minds in there. I've served on the diversity committee in the Bar Association because I think it's important for us to recognize that, we should always be trying to address things and change things. And with my background, I think that training for judges, that perspective on the bench, not just at the trial level, but every level, is something that is going to try to shape the way we change our judiciary. Our judiciary is inherently skewed. And until you're willing to accept that, you're not actually going to be making effective change as the change makers. And then one of the best parts about being a judge is that you can effectuate real change. It's wonderful because if I call a meeting as a judge, people actually show up because feel like they have to show up versus saying, hey, why don't you come to a meeting? So I think in order to do that, though, you have to understand that the system is flawed and we have to make changes to it.
Absolutely. And you could just talk a little bit about, your, like the kind of difference in experiences, as being, a prosecutor, prosecuting, people that are charged with, domestic violence related, crimes to now, where you sit now. Could you talk a little bit about the division, of the court that you sit in, and how, kind of what you did before, prepared you, for what you do today, and then thus has, put you in a position to take this next step that you're pursuing?
Sure. I think, I was an accomplished trial lawyer. I tried 25 homicides when I was a DA, and those are 25 homicides more than I wanted to try because those cases shouldn't have happened. And trying those cases, you realize that people do things that maybe they shouldn't have done, or people are in a position that they didn't want to be in, and they make bad choices. And I think people that come in front of you as a judge, they're not seeing you on their best day. Very few people go to court because they're having a great day. They go to court, for a variety of reasons, but they're not going, whether they're a defendant or a victim or, a party in a case, a plaintiff, a defendant, they're coming to court because they have some issue. And recognizing that we meet people where they are in their journey, I think is very, very important for a judge. Everybody has to be treated differently. Everybody has to be individualized. And I think coming from the domestic violence world and where I was coming from, I'm not somebody that experienced that. So that for me, that was a whole new learning curve. I didn't understand any of the dynamics of power and control or why a batterer did things that maybe didn't make sense to me. And, we spent an entire generation trying to ask people why they stayed in a domestic violence relationship versus asking the person that was using violence why you're using the violence to perpetrate the goal that they were trying to accomplish. And what I've learned from that, and I think what I've brought to the bench, is that you still have to try to treat the underlying issue. If you just keep trying to remove the party who's being abused from the situation without addressing the batterer, the person that's using the violence, you're not actually going to effectuate change. You might make that one person safe, but you're not going to make the community safe as a whole. And trying to address, what the trauma that person received, or why they're acting in the way, what type of relationship did they understand, or how did their background influence why they think that they should act this way or they could act this way. And as a judge now, sitting there, it caused me to delve much deeper into people before I would make a decision. There's lots of things that you would just want to make a very quick decision. But I think one of the things that you do as a judge is you have to make a very informed decision. Sometimes it's not a hasty decision, but you have to make a decision. And one of the things I'm most proudest of is I've been on the bench for 5 years now in Allegheny County, and I've never been overturned for a decision that I've made. And I think that's because of the deliberate nature that I've made in terms of trying to decide what I'm going to do before I make that decision.
Ryan, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to ask again something from the questionnaire. Just when we're talking about, your main priorities if elected to this position, and one of those main priorities that you listed was using advanced technologies to overcome inherent barriers in place. And so I just wanted to, ask for you to elaborate a little bit on that point. What that really looks like, and how that would serve your other priorities in this position.
So I think that, one of the obviously the pandemic's been a horrible thing for many, many people. But one of the things that I think that it has forced the court system to do is to make changes it wasn't ready or willing to do. I'm still presiding every single day. I was on the bench today dealing with a variety of cases from my dining room table. You can see my kitchen behind me. That's what people coming in front of me on court see, because that's usually where I sit when I'm presiding. And I think that one of the things that we have to realize is that we do advanced communication. So we have the ability to do things that we weren't able to do years ago. And sometimes that means not actually going inside of a building. I told you that I was named a National Judicial Fellow for my judicial leadership. And with that, I got an award, which, it's great to put a plaque on your wall or whatever. But the important part of that is, part of that award that I received was research dollars. So that meant, Futures Without Violence, groups that are national that are willing to do a survey or an investigation for me to try to learn what information we can do to make the court system better. And what I did choose for them to do, which I changed after the pandemic, was trying to recognize whether or not we have more participation from people. I deal with a lot of cases involving families. So, with kids in CYF, I didn't always have both parties there. And you don't know why that is. And sometimes as a judge, you're thinking, oh, they're not interested in their kids. Is that why they're not appearing? Or is the issue that, they live in the Mon Valley and there's no public transportation from the Mon Valley, or they live in the Allegheny Valley and there's really no public transportation there. Or they knew that they would have to come to court and sit for maybe 5 or 6 hours. And that meant that they weren't going to be able to go to work that day. And not going to work that day meant they could get fired, or that they weren't getting a living wage. And because they weren't getting a living wage, they couldn't afford to take that day off. And so we have those inherent obstacles in our court system. I think using advanced communication technologies allows us to get over that, because someone can go to their boss and say, listen, I know I'm going to get a Zoom call from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Can I take my lunch hour late today so I can actually participate in this court hearing? So part of those research dollars that I was awarded is to try to see whether or not we have more participation by people using advanced communication technology than we did a year prior to that. And so that's how I think that we're going to be able to do things. I think we're going to be able to see whether or not it's more successful or less successful. But we want people to have access to the courts. That is the goal, is to have access to the courts.
Absolutely. And for my final question, again, and I asked this to a couple of other prior guests tonight, again, as a former prosecutor and as a sitting judge, could you just, again, from your perspective, talk about, what you, from a Commonwealth Court perspective, the importance of just having, access to legal representation, and just how important, that is not only, at the trial court level, but I would imagine, at the appellate court level, at any level, and why, that's important to you. Because I know that's something that you've mentioned, not only during this campaign, but in the past as well.
Absolutely. I teach at Duquesne Law School. I've taught there for the last 8 years. And most people thought that I was going to quit after I was elected judge, because, I was doing it and then I didn't need to do it anymore. But I've stayed there because I think that you can make an impact upon the system. And one of the classes that I teach is a class that tries to make better prosecutors, try to create better prosecutors, because prosecutors make a huge impact, much more than judges oftentimes, and makes many more decisions on a daily basis before it ever gets to court, whether to charge somebody, whether or not they're going to lose their liberty, whether or not they're going to approve an agreement or a plea agreement or not a plea agreement. Those things impact people on a daily life. And so for that reason, I've stayed as a professor at Duquesne, because I'm trying to make sure that people are learning how to make good decisions. And as a result of that, I think I've become a better judge because I know how to make good decisions. Now, at the appellate level, we're talking about a wide array of things that are going to affect people's daily lives. We want things to be accessible. But the Commonwealth Court is such an imperative court, and there are 2 openings on this court. And this court makes decisions that impact people without actually being a party, because the Commonwealth Court serves the people. It's truly the court that makes sure that the government is following the law. So anytime there is any government funding anything, any appeal from any government agency, and we have a plethora of government agencies, that's what impacts people on a daily basis. The air that we breathe, the energy that we use, the money that we receive, how our tax dollars are spent, the constitutionality of laws that's passed by the legislature. That court is truly a check and balance on our entire system. And that's why it's so interesting for me. And that's why I'm running for the Commonwealth Court, because, how much funding a school gets is something that obviously is going to go through the Commonwealth Court if there's a lawsuit, because that deals with public education. It deals with taxpayer dollars. All those things impact everybody without you actually being a plaintiff or defendant in that case. And that's what we have to do, is we have to make sure that people are having accessibility. Now, obviously that involves representation, that involves being heard, but that involves all levels. And that's why the Commonwealth Court is so important to me.
Thank you so much for that, Judge David Spurgeon, candidate for Commonwealth Court. Could you just share with us, besides what's at the bottom of the scroll, ways that folks can get in touch with you and in touch with your campaign?
Absolutely. So obviously you can look at the things at the bottom of the scroll there. But, if you want to contact us, you can contact us at judgespurgeon2021@gmail.com. You can check out our Facebook page, which is Judge David Spurgeon for Commonwealth Court. You can check out our website, which is judgespurgeonforcommonwealth.com. And I encourage you to do that, because my grandmother is going to be 101 next year. And she's outlived all of her children. And she's told me she's too old to door knock. So she recently made a video that we just posted right before Mother's Day of her explaining why she believes people should vote for me. So if you have a free moment or two, go to our website and check out the video to see why my grandmother believes that I would be such a good judge on the appellate court as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Always great to see you, Judge David Spurgeon, always representing the Mon Valley, McKeesport in the house. So thank you so much for joining us, and good luck on the trail, and look forward to talking to you again soon. Absolutely.
And one of my proudest moments is obviously swearing in certain people and making the video for that. So you know what I'm talking about on that, Kahari.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks so much.
See you guys.
Take care. Yeah. And full disclosure, when my wife got sworn in as county controller, Judge David Spurgeon was there along with myself and my kids. So, in the spirit of transparency, like I said, we go way back. So now I believe Judge Tamika Lane is still with us. We were going to bring her in. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you're on a tight timeline, but I'm glad we were going to have an opportunity to introduce you to some folks in Western Pennsylvania. We have Philadelphia, a Common Pleas Court Judge, Tamika Lane, who is and I believe, and you're running for Superior Court. I want to make sure I get that right.
You got it right. You're right.
We're going back and forth, you know what I mean, between Superior Court and Commonwealth Court. So I didn't want to confuse the voters. So first and foremost, can you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself for folks here in Western Pennsylvania who may not be as familiar with you as with some of the other candidates, and talk about your qualifications and background and why you're running for Superior Court.
Sure. Before I get started, is there a glare, or can you see me okay?
Yeah, we can see you fine. There's a little bit of light in the background, but it's fine. It's not. Well, that's better, but it was fine either way. I couldn't
figure out how to do it on my computer, so I'm on my phone. So.
But yeah, no problem. No, you look great. It's great.
Okay. All right. So good evening, everyone. My name is Tamika Lane, and I'm currently a judge in Philadelphia on a court of common pleas. So I'm on the same court that Judge Spurgeon is on, where we are the trial court. So just a little bit of background about just who I am before I get into, everything else. I was born and raised in West Philadelphia, kind of like the Fresh Prince, but just move a little further down to the other side of the tracks. And there was this place called The Bottom. And it was there that my grandmother, who worked in the cafeteria, instilled in me a strong sense of service. What she would always say is that it's not about you, child. It's not about you, honey. And I think that is an invaluable lesson to learn as a child, that it's not about you. And you need to be of service to others. And that's how I've lived my life. Before I was a judge, before I was a lawyer, I was a public school teacher. I taught 7th grade social studies. And after law school, I was a law clerk where I drafted opinions for the judge I worked with. Then I went on to become a public defender, where I tried thousands of cases a year. Everyone knows the public defender's office. We represent people who cannot afford to hire an attorney. And I handled complex criminal matters before judges and juries. I was also a supervisor at the public defender's office. I was a child advocate where I advocated on behalf of abused and neglected children. Also worked in our Pennsylvania State Senate, where I was the Democratic Executive Director for the State Government Committee. And that's when we had that crazy photo ID law that was one of the most repressive in the state, as well as that gerrymandering law map that was later declared unconstitutional. All that came through on my watch. So I was so honored and privileged that I got to draft the amendments that the Democratic caucus introduced to try to minimize the impact it had on marginalized communities, as well as draft legislation and fight for everyday working people and our values. After I was elected to the Court of Common Pleas in 2013, I've been assigned to the Criminal Trial Division. I am the only judge that hears human trafficking cases, but I also do a lot of family and domestic violence cases. I do sexual assaults, rapes, all serious crimes. And I preside over jury trials as well as some where I make the decision. On the bench, I've been very, very busy with numerous reentry programs. And I've also been appointed to numerous boards, but I never lost my love of teaching. I'm still teaching. I was co-chair of this program called Advancing Civics Education with the Philadelphia Bar Association, where we go into public high schools and teach civics. We know how important that is now more than ever. Our kids are crying out and they want to be change agents. They just don't always know how to do so. And I'm also an adjunct professor at Harkin College, where I teach domestic violence and other legal classes. So it's just so important. I heard Brian Neff and Jill Beck here. They're also running for Superior Court. And this court is so important. There is one vacancy for Superior Court, and it is a Republican vacancy. So this court, this election is it's key, because it's here this time that we can actually flip the court Democratic. But I also want to say that when we look at who we put on this court, we need to look at all of them. Yes, we all have experience. We all can do the job. But what is different about us? What kind of life experiences have we had? You guys already heard I wasn't born with a silver spoon, but I am first generation college and proud of it. When I was an undergrad at Howard University, like our Vice President Kamala Harris, I was putting together boxes at a post office trying to pay my way. I'm first generation law school. I am a single mom. When I was a public school teacher, I was still working retail because I didn't make enough money to pay my bills. I'm a cancer survivor. I'm a fighter. And I know what it's like when you had to adjust to the new normal. Most people, when they interact with our judicial system, they also had to adjust to a new normal, be it a divorce, child custody, they've been accused of a crime, a victim of a crime, maybe something went horrifically wrong in a medical procedure. Whatever it is, they too had to adjust to a new normal. And as the only judge and the only person of color who is running for a Superior Court, that matters. My lived experience matters. My professional experience matters. It is so important. I'm the only one who has made decisions. I am the only one who's authored judicial opinions that are often cited as well-reasoned by the Superior Court. And the Superior Court is simply this. They look at the trial court to see if any errors were made. And who best can do that than someone who has done it day in and day out, not only as a trial judge, but also as a trial attorney. And that matters. When we look at the appellate court, there are 31 judges between the Supreme Court, the Superior Court, and the Commonwealth Court. For our appellate courts, and only one is a person of color, and that's Judge Carolyn Nichols. And this is 2021. And it is so important that all voices are heard and all voices matter from all the communities across this Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So thank you so much for allowing me to introduce myself to you.
Thanks, Judge Lane. And Ron has a follow-up.
Yeah, thanks, Kahari. And thank you, Judge Lane, for that really thorough, discussion of your background, your qualifications, lived experiences, everything like that. So just, following up on that, what really has been your, main motivator, between or behind deciding to run for this specific position and make that jump from trial court to appellate court. And if elected, what specific things would you be looking to accomplish? With that different perspective that you have, anything that you would be looking to change, through that position.
I think the main thing that motivated me is that we were sitting around talking, and I say we, I mean like my colleagues. My daughter is now a junior at Howard University, and we can't keep talking about things. We have to step up. I know it's trite, you hear it all the time, but you have to be the change that you want to see. And we can't keep talking about the lack of diversity. We can't talk about representation matters and we don't feel like we're represented. And I say we, I mean the community. All these things matter. And it's also a natural progression from being a public defender, a trial attorney, working in the Senate, to being a trial judge when I was elected in 2013, where I'm hearing very serious cases, to now going on and working and being elected a judge on the Superior Court, where it actually involves all 67 counties in Pennsylvania, instead of just that one here in Philadelphia County that I impact. And we have to also be a role model. When I was a young attorney, when I went into court, I saw a Black judge, a Black woman who was younger. And when I saw her, I said, wow, I can do that. It allowed me to dream in that possibility, because these things matter. When I grew up, in the bottom, I never aspired to be a lawyer, let alone a judge. I grew up wanting to be a secretary. It's noble work in that, because people in my community, that's what we did. They worked in cafeterias, they were secretaries, they were janitors and things of that nature. And it wasn't until I was a junior in high school that I got to be in this program for inner city Black kids, Black and brown kids, that they exposed me to different professions like the law, medicine, and things of that nature. And it opened up a whole new world to me. The judge I clerked for actually went to Howard University as well as his law clerk. I had never even heard of Howard University until that. So look how that changed my life. So that's why I stay in the community, making sure that I'm visible, and kids know, our young people know that this too can be you. You can do it. When I ran for Court of Common Pleas, they told me I couldn't win. They said nobody from the hood where you from ever won. You broke, you don't have any money. I sold my car and I ran and I won. You can't let people determine what you're going to be. When I decided to run for Superior Court, they told me, oh, you can't win. You're too dark. Your name is Tamika. You need to change your name to Tammy. I mean, you can't let these things get in your way, especially when you're doing it not just for you, but for others.
Nah, absolutely, man. That's really, really powerful, experience. And along those lines, could you just talk about, like in a tangible way, how you say, representation matters. How has someone, from the bottoms, and I went to IUP. One of my best friends is from West Philly. I went to Overbrook High, so he wasn't from the bottom.
Overbrook. That's where I do.
Okay.
That's civics at Overbrook.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So I'm very familiar with West Philly, and I do have some friends that are from the bottoms. I heard many stories. You know what I mean? So coming from, that perspective, how is that tangibly, made an impact, on the Philadelphia court system, having someone like you, and obviously, you're one person, but, could you just talk about tangibly how can having, one person enter into a system like this begin to create those ripples of change?
Well, it's having a seat at a table, having a voice. Our voice matters and our lived experience matters. And it's so many times that I'm in these judicial meetings and people are saying things and I'm looking like, what world are you in? Like, no, I'm gonna give you a prime example. This was when I was a public defender. I represented this lady. She was just on the ball, but she had fell into hard times and she stole something like retail theft. And after you have so many retail thefts, it becomes a felony. So that's why I had her in my room. And she was coming in just for a status and she was supposed to pay $50. And she didn't have it. She borrowed a bus fare to even get to court. And she came in with her baby who was still in Pampers. And I had $10. Like, I had no money. And I'm a public defender. And I'm like, I got $10. So when it was time for her case to be called, I was like, well, the judge asked for $50. I said, Judge, she doesn't have it, but we have $10 today. And the judge said, no, absolutely not. That's disrespectful to this court. And I tried to explain to her that she had to borrow car fare and $50 is a lot. And, people have different lived experiences. And so the judge thought it was disrespectful and that she willfully just did not want to pay $50 and actually locked her up and said, call for child protective services to come and take her baby. And I'm like, no, judge, no. I'm like, just like, let me try to find her family, like somebody who can come get the baby. So the judge said, I'll give you 1 hour, but you are the public defender in my room and you have all these trials on my list and I'm not taking a break. I said, no problem, judge. I put that baby on my hip, tried that case. And by the time I finished trying that case, her father was there and took that baby. So it is so important that we have voices of regular people. I wasn't born with a silver spoon, and some of my colleagues were. And that's why our voices need to be heard, and we have to have a seat at the table. It matters.
Absolutely. Ryan, do you have another follow-up?
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, so as our first guest tonight, Judge Dumas was talking about, a lot of the times people aren't super focused on these elections as much as they are presidential
She's the
elections.
judge I was talking about. She's the judge that when I saw her, I knew that maybe I could be a judge one day. That's her.
Oh wow, okay, small world.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just kind of building off what she was talking about earlier, people aren't necessarily always super focused on these judicial elections. They don't understand the importance of them. They don't know as much about the candidates. So how have you really gone about communicating both the importance of these positions and the importance of having someone with your perspective in that position? Like how's that been included in your campaigning in the ways that you've gone about trying to connect with the community in those regards?
Well, first of all, I go any and everywhere. I'm not scared. I grew up in a place where people were scared to come to my house and visit me because they didn't want to come in my neighborhood. So when I campaign in those places like where I grew up, where you think that you're forgotten because you're not. And that is so important to me. But I go everywhere. I'm still working full time. I'm still doing trials. So I am going out, on the weekends and things of that nature. I've been out to Allegheny so many times. I was blessed to have a huge labor endorsement from the Allegheny Fayette, AFL-CIO, the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers. So I've been out there a number of times, making sure I connect with the community and talk to different people. But I'm on social media. I have videos. My first video was just telling you about me, who I am, and the strong family I come from, with my daughter narrating it. Because, I'm setting an example for her that you have to, first of all, she has to see you have to work hard for anything that you want in life. It's just not given to us. And especially when we're not born rich. When you run for these appellate courts like this, you need at least $2 million. And historically, we Black and brown communities, we don't come from that. We don't have that money. So I'm out here just doing sheer work. I'm running down my sneakers, running down my heels, making sure I knock on all these doors. And we're phone banking. Like I said, I'm on social media, just everywhere. And I would love if you guys went to my website, judgelane.com, follow me on social media and get the word out, because it matters. Out of 31 appellate judges, we only have one in 2021. It has to change. We have to say, no, we're not going to tolerate it anymore. And as the only judge that is in this race, the only one with experience on both sides of the bench, that matters. And we have to make sure we go to the polls and show how important that is and how that matters.
Thank you so much. That's Judge Tamika Lane from Philadelphia joining us. I know you had in-person events, so thank you for taking 15 minutes out of your time and joining us. I guess that's one of the advantages of, this virtual world that's been created, out of this pandemic crisis, is that, in the past, we'd have to put together a forum where everybody would have to come together from all over the state, where we can kind of do this thing where people can kind of pop in. And we can still, reach, people. So thank you so much for joining us. And again, could you let people know how to get in touch with your campaign?
Yes, it is judgelane.com. That is my website, and you'll see my video, and it has all my social media links. And I'm just going to ask each and every one of you to just go out and vote. Tell 5, tell 10, tell 15 other people. Bring them with you, because we see how important the courts are, and more specifically, how important judges are. And judges matter. I may not be from Allegheny County. I may be from I'm from Philadelphia, but we have a shared experience. And I am going to be a voice for all of us. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much. And I did see that you made it down to my very, very good friend, Jamie Younger's establishment, Young Brothers on the North Side.
I've been there a few times.
Yeah. That's my spot. So,
When Judge Spurgeon is out here, You look in his pictures, he's always with me. So that's my
Awesome.
buddy.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much for joining us again, Tamika Lane, from Philadelphia, candidate for Superior Court. Good luck. Looking forward to talking to you again on the trail. Take care. And that was Judge Tamika Lane. So now we down to our final two guests for tonight. I believe Justice Maria McLaughlin is still with us. I know she had an in-person event, but she was still able to stick with us. Thank you so much for joining us, and apologize for the long delay. Just want to thank you for your patience. We have Justice Maria McLaughlin. I don't know if you're joining us from Philadelphia, but I know you hail from Philadelphia, even though you are a Western Pennsylvanian. Welcome. Please introduce yourself. Tell us, why you're running for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, as well as the statewide judicial office you hold now.
Thank you, Kahari and Ryan. And I am in Philadelphia currently, so that's a little rare during this campaign to actually be in my hometown. But I am honored to represent the entire state on our Pennsylvania Superior Court. And I am running for the one open seat on our Supreme Court. I am honored to be the Democratic nominee. I think that speaks volumes, not only to who I am as a judge, but who I am as a person, that I am the only Democrat running for this state court. And I'm happy, because boy, do I have a battle on my hands in the general election. But for those who may not know me, in 2017, when I ran for our Superior Court, I spent time in each and every county for two reasons. The first one is out of respect, because I think if you're going to ask folks in each and every county to help you get elected, then it's important to show up physically, listen, see what's important in those counties. And the other reason was because I wanted to be a better Superior Court judge. I am representing the entire state. Not just Philadelphia County, not just Allegheny County, but Forest and Pike and Tioga and every single county in between. And so now when I get those cases, they're important to me. They mean something to me. I spent time and understand the importance of what is before me on that desk. So I am Judge Maria McLaughlin. I am the first one in my family to ever go to college. I grew up in a row home in Overbrook. You would think that Overbrook is where everyone is from, I guess, based on these Zooms that you're having. But I grew up in Overbrook. And again, I only got a college degree because I worked 3 part-time jobs and had a cheerleading scholarship. So going to college was the only thing that was ever expected and dreamed of, truly, in my family. So the fact that I am running for our state's highest court isn't anywhere I ever thought I would be. No one in my family ever dreamed that I would be there. I wish that my parents were here today to see that I am a candidate for our state's highest court. I did have my mother with me along the way. And so that's how I got elected the very first time. Just like Judge Spurgeon, I spent 19 and a half years in the district attorney's office fighting for children. And I worked my way from the top to the bottom, from the bottom to the top. And so I always say that the scariest thing I ever had to do in that office was resign to run for judge of the Court of Common Pleas, because it's what I had to do. I had to give up the only job I ever had as a lawyer and resign with 70 vacation days in the bank to run for judge. I was a single mom of 2 boys, and boy, was I scared. But I knew I had to teach them by example. And then just weeks after that, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And I thought it was too much. I wasn't going to do it. And unbeknownst to me, my mom stood outside this park in Philadelphia called Rittenhouse Square and got me every single signature I needed to be on the ballot for Court of Common Pleas. And that's who I am, folks. I am my mother. At the top of this ticket, you have a fighter. And I promise to fight for each and every one of us, just like I do every day on the Superior Court. So thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Ryan, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thanks, Kahari. And thank you again, Judge McLaughlin, for joining us tonight and providing that introduction to everyone watching and tuning in with us tonight. So I just wanted to ask, given all your reasons for running for this position and your background, what sort of change you would be looking to affect if elected to this position. What specific things you would be looking to do, in order to make it a more equitable court, a more accessible court to all Pennsylvanians, a more transparent court. Any sort of, specific things you'd be looking to do, to achieve those types of goals.
Well, sure. I think I would do what I did my entire career, which is lead by example, not only in my personal life with my two sons, who I believe, because I made that first move when I left my only job to become a judge, and I just put myself out there. I think that's why I have one son who went into the Peace Corps in Zambia, Africa, and the other one who became a chef in Italy. I don't think they would have taken those things if I didn't show them by example of what you could do when you just put yourself out there. And I think leading by example is important. I think the first thing that you do is you look at your staff to make it fair and equitable. We should look no further than our staff. And I'm glad that you asked that, because our staff is not something that's public knowledge. But on the Superior Court, I made sure that my staff represents our community. Our community meaning everyone. I made sure that I had someone on my staff that's a minority, that's from the LGBTQ community. When I didn't have a minority apply for a job as a law clerk, I saved a job and recruited, because that's who I am. And if I am going to be fair and equitable and transparent, well, then it has to start right within my own chambers. But the other thing is, you never see me just coming out when I'm a candidate. And I think that's why I get elected. I'm out in the community all the time, not just when I'm asking for your vote. I think you need to be out there speaking to everyone, helping everyone. Just because you're a judge does not mean that you're not part of the community. Yes, you're limited in what you can do when you are a judge. It's different than being a legislator, but that doesn't mean that you can't be in the community, teaching education, speaking anywhere you can to impoverished communities, and just putting yourself out there. So I think the most important change that I would do is to lead by example. Fortunately, the appellate courts are very transparent. For example, you could pull up any of our opinions, you just Google our names and they're out there, unlike at the trial level. So I think the higher up that you get, it is more transparent, and that's how it should be. So I would just continue doing what I have done my entire career as a prosecutor, as a defense attorney, and everything that I did when I left the district attorney's office, to being a trial judge, and now on our Superior Court, if I'm honored enough to have a seat as a justice on our state's highest court.
Thank you so much for that. And again, I've mentioned, several times, with our guests, we obviously, we love politics, love having political discussions, but another thing that we try to do, is educate folks. And sometimes, it gets, a little wonky, but, I did want to take an opportunity for you just to talk a little bit about kind of the difference between Superior Court, and Supreme Court. We had a number of Superior Court candidates and Commonwealth Court candidates on tonight, where we got to talk about the nuances, of those courts. But if you could talk a little bit about, what Pennsylvania Supreme Court is, and why is this so important, and what is the difference between Superior Court and Supreme Court, and just to give folks, just a little bit of understanding, of the role that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court plays in our lives.
Sure. Well, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is the court of last resort. It is the highest court in our state, and it is of extreme importance, but it is very different than the Superior Court. The Supreme Court has awesome duties, not just with what cases that they hear. It's obvious that those cases are always televised, first and foremost. You sit in a panel of 7 all of the time. And again, those cases are transparent. You can watch it on PCN. You can Google it and find out every single case that's on the docket to be decided and the cases that have been decided. But the Supreme Court is also important because it appoints to boards and commissions throughout this Commonwealth. And it is the one who deals with every single courthouse in this Commonwealth, all 67 counties. And so that's an awesome experience and an awesome responsibility. The Superior Court is very different. You don't have the right to appeal to the Supreme Court also. It's a discretionary court. So the Supreme Court picks and chooses what it will hear. The Superior Court is a court where you don't get to pick and choose. The cases that come before me are there because you have the absolute right to appeal to the Superior Court. We are the busiest appellate court in the nation, approximately 8,000 appeals a year. I was appointed by our president judge to be the liaison between the Pennsylvania Superior Court and the Pennsylvania Bar Association and each individual bar association throughout this Commonwealth. So you can imagine how busy I was during COVID because, boy, we had a lot of issues in each courthouse and how we were going to handle cases when COVID first hit. And so if you are not happy with what a trial judge does, whether it's your divorce case, whether it's a multi-million-dollar medical malpractice case, you have the absolute right to appeal to the Superior Court. Additionally, the Superior Court grants or denies wiretaps. That's something that not many folks know. And so that's an important part of what I do on a daily basis. So the courts are very different. But I believe that if you look at all of the candidates that are running for Supreme Court, I have the largest breadth of experience of anyone running. From my experience working in the state legislature before I even became an attorney, from working as an attorney, a prosecutor, defense work, I've done labor laws, I've done election law. Now I sat on the Court of Common Pleas in Philadelphia in family and criminal law. I never missed a day of work in 6 years, and I never had a decision overturned. And now I'm on our Superior Court. And the Supreme Court hears most of the appeals from the Superior Court, much more than the Commonwealth Court. And so I am ready to go. I just need everybody to help get me there. But the court of last resort is our Pennsylvania Supreme Court.
Thank you so much for that, Ryan.
Yep, thanks, Kahari. Yeah, and I wanted to revisit the question that was submitted by our organizational partner, Casa San Jose, because I asked it earlier, as it pertained to the position of Superior Court. But so, asking this question in the context of, what could be done as an elected judge on the Supreme Court. And the question was related to, ensuring that Pennsylvania residents that are non-native or, not fully fluent English speakers, are given the same opportunities as everyone else. So, what things could be done and what things would you do if elected to the Supreme Court, in addition to interpreters already being in courtrooms, what else could be done if elected to the Supreme Court to really ensure, that full level of accessibility and access to justice for non-native and not fluent English speakers.
Absolutely. Well, I started off just with my website alone. My website alone on judgemclaughlin.com, you can click on and it's in English and Spanish. I know that's not every language, but I certainly know the importance of so many folks not speaking English and speaking the Spanish language, so much so that I wanted my own website to be accessible. But as a judge, that was always of utmost importance to me. And a person, just, a person. I was on my son's public home and school board, and everybody would always say it was only the same parents that always got involved. Well, that was because we had the most diverse group of students where I purposely sent my sons to school, Central High School in Philadelphia. And it was because many of the parents didn't speak English. And so what I did as an active member of the Home and School Board was to reach out to those community through the kids who did speak English, to get their folks involved and not to be embarrassed because you don't speak the English language. Look, my grandparents immigrated here and didn't speak the English language. So I know personally what it means to not speak the language when I had family members who came over here as gardeners and had to go to their children who are my parents and my grandparents and say, what does this say? What kind of flowers do they want us to plant? Just so that they can buy them and earn a living because they didn't speak English. So certainly as a justice on our Supreme Court, I bring that personal experience and would absolutely ensure that this is something that's of utmost importance, because let me tell you something, the interpreters, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has complete control over all of these things. And we have computer programs that do that, but we also have interpreters in every different language. And we need to make them accessible, not just in the big counties, but in each and every county, because access to justice is the most important thing in our country, not just our state of Pennsylvania.
Absolutely. And before we go to our final, guest, I did want to, bounce back to something that, that Ryan talked about, to a certain degree, and you alluded to it as well in your earlier, comments. Just we could just circle back, one last time and just talk about, why you see, this election is so important, and why, you see it's, so important for you to make, this ascension from the Superior Court to the Supreme Court, because obviously, you could be comfortable and continue, in your 10-year term, on the Superior Court. But again, just to reiterate, to the viewers and the voters, why the Supreme Court election is so important this year and why, you're leading into it.
Well, I certainly think we don't have to look any further than just last year's elections and some of those cases. And, it was our Supreme Court who saved our votes in Pennsylvania. And so you just have to look at that and know why the Supreme Court is so important. There's different branches of government for a reason. And so I don't want to legislate from the bench. I don't want to be a legislator, or I would have run for the legislature. I love being a judge, but we all know that judges matter. And as this election goes on more and more, we know that it's the judges' roles that affect our lives each and every day, and especially at our Pennsylvania Supreme Court level. Just in your county alone, Senator Brewster, would he be a senator right now if it wasn't for our Pennsylvania Supreme Court? So I think that is the perfect note to end it on an Allegheny County Zoom, is that we need me on our Pennsylvania Supreme Court so that we could keep your senators in Pittsburgh in office. So let me end at that, Allegheny County.
That's awesome. Now, thank you so much for that. And before you leave, you just tell folks, besides anything that's scrolling at the bottom of the screen, how they can get in touch with your campaign over these last 8 days.
Sure. I have a website that is judgemclaughlin.com. On that website is an introductory video, and I would love for you to watch it. I would love for you to share it, because when we started off this campaign during COVID campaigning, it was very difficult and I wasn't able to have a big announcement. And so if anybody could just watch that and share it, it's on judgemclaughlin.com, and everything that you need to know about me or how to get in touch with my campaign is there. But I certainly am no stranger to Pittsburgh. Not only my family is there, I preside there, and I think I spent 21 times during my 2017 run there. So I am no stranger to Allegheny County, and I can't wait to come back again. I was already there 5 times, and my campaign didn't even start yet.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And again, Judge Maria McLaughlin, who is the one candidate that we talked to tonight that is running unopposed in the primary. So we will see Judge McLaughlin on the November ballot. So we look forward to continuing this conversation over the course of this year. So thank you so much. Looking forward to when you get back to your original neck of the woods, Western Pennsylvania, Allegheny County. But until then, safe travels, best of luck, and looking forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Kahari and Ryan. See you later, Allegheny County, for now.
Okay, take care. And that is Judge Maria McLaughlin, who is currently a justice on Pennsylvania Superior Court and currently the the unopposed Democratic candidate for Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And now we will go to our final segment of the night. Last but not least, we have Amanda Green Hawkins, candidate for Commonwealth Court. Welcome. How you doing? Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well. Good evening.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your patience waiting to back cleanup. So let's just jump right into it. You are so very well known here in Western Pennsylvania. I know you're original, from the state of New Jersey, but you really have made Western Pennsylvania your home. So just tell us a little bit about yourself for those who are unfamiliar with you, what you do right now, as well as why you are seeking a seat on the Commonwealth Court.
You bet. Well, good evening, everyone. I am Amanda Green Hawkins, and I am running for Pennsylvania's Commonwealth Court. I live right in the city of Pittsburgh with my husband and our 2 children. They're both Pittsburgh public school students. And I have been a lawyer here in Pittsburgh with the Steelworkers Union for 19 plus, I say going on 20 years. And it makes me uniquely prepared as well as uniquely qualified for the work of the Commonwealth Court, because my career is steeped in administrative law. And I've been doing appeals before administrative agencies at the federal and state level around the country, and also appealing decisions of administrative agencies to federal and state courts around the country. And the Pennsylvania Bar Association noted my extensive background and experience with administrative law, which is certainly important for success on this court. And when I talk about administrative law, of course, I expect lawyers to know what that means. But here's how I break it down for most people. What administrative law means is that when there were 100 women in a workplace who didn't speak English, they only spoke Spanish, and they were being treated horribly by their employer, subjected to sexual harassment, subjected to inhumane and unsafe working conditions, not being paid their fair wages. They were really being taken advantage of. It means that I was there dealing with the administrative agency to make sure that these women were getting their fair wages and turning the workplace around so that they could have dignity and respect on the job. My job is to work with administrative agencies to get those things done. And it may mean that I'm working, fighting for one person who may be at risk of losing their job because they're addicted to opioids. But here's what I know, that many times people get addicted to opioids because they got hurt in the workplace to begin with. And it's when they are recovering from those injuries while they're out on workers' compensation that they become addicted to those opioids. And when it's time to return to work, they're still dealing with those issues. And I am there to fight for their dignity and respect and fight for their second chance for reform, because that's also important in our judicial system, part of the fairness and part of the compassion. And sometimes it means that I am working on behalf of the daycare home, family child daycare home operator, whose clients are single mothers and low-income women in her community. And she provides a much-needed service, childcare, so that these women can go to work to try to make ends meet to support their families. And when the state comes in and maybe takes that license, I'm there to deal with the administrative agency and to go to court if necessary to get that license back so that this person can continue to provide this much-needed service to the community. This is the work that I've done in my 20 years. And it's also the work of the Commonwealth Court. This is the court that can affect not just your job. It can also affect your right to vote. It can also affect your access to healthcare and so many things that we take for granted, but don't realize until an administrative agency decides to pull a license or to do something, to take something away from us. We can go to the Commonwealth Court to make sure that justice is served. And aside from this experience, I know you're looking for someone who is fair, and I certainly had to show fairness when I worked as a mediator and when I worked with a federal court judge as well as a state court judge. I know you're also looking for someone with integrity, and I certainly had to show integrity when I served 2 terms as an elected official on Allegheny County Council, and when I served on the Port Authority Board of Allegheny County, and when I also served on the Community Task Force on Police Reform. And I know that you're looking for someone with the right temperament, someone who's going to treat people with dignity and respect. And that's important because we know that people are more likely to live with a decision, even if they disagree with it, as long as they know that they've been treated with dignity and respect and their voice is fully heard. And this is what I plan to bring with me, these experiences to the Commonwealth Court. And it's particularly important now when we know that we need more diversity on our courts and more perspective, so we can all understand what's happening and understand the decisions coming out look and sound more like all of us and not just some of us.
Well, thank you for that, Ryan.
Yeah, I appreciate all that background information. Yeah, and thanks, Kahari, for passing that off. And so I just wanted to ask, yeah, kind of as a follow up to one of your responses that you made on our questionnaire in response to our question about issues with the court system with structural racism and discrimination, and you talked about the importance of not only diversity in the courts but also inclusion. And so I just wanted to, if you could just talk a little bit about that distinction, why inclusion in addition to diversity is so crucial, and how you would advocate for that if elected to this position.
Diversity just to me just deals with how things look. And so when there are issues with discrimination, racism, sexism in a workplace or any other place, many times the solution is, we have to increase diversity. But you don't take care of the problem simply by adding Black and brown faces in places and spaces. That's not how it happens. And a good example of this is when you hear people talk about different schools or workplaces and say, they don't have that many people of color. And when they have people of color, it seems that those people always leave after a year or two. And what the problem generally is that the voices and perspectives of the diverse populations aren't included, aren't valued, and part of the discussion, really. It's like they're there for the picture, but not for the discussion that's happening at the table, where their voices can be heard and their perspectives can be added to the discussion to really effectuate change. And so I say that diversity without inclusion is fleeting, because people whose voices are often quashed are interested usually in making sure that their perspectives are valued and heard. And when they're not, they're going to move on to a place where that can happen and where they can effectuate real change. And so in the judicial system, diversity is only part of the answer. Only part of the answer, because when we're talking about justice and fairness, including perspectives of people who have been union lawyers, public defenders, ACLU attorneys, neighborhood legal services, all of these perspectives, particularly from representing people in marginalized communities, those perspectives are important for discussions of justice and fairness. And that's what has to happen in our system, more inclusion of those perspectives. Okay. Go ahead.
No, thank you. No, thank you for that. But I did want to ask a question, just about your background. You have a very interesting background. If you could talk about, particularly, when we look at the Commonwealth Court, and, me, I've gotten, a crash course, on all this stuff as a layman, and, knowing that it deals with, state government and governmental bodies. What, experience do you bring as a former county council person, who was a legislator, and made laws, as well as someone who sat on the Port Authority Board, which is a quasi-public agency that falls under a lot of jurisdiction from the state. And I would imagine if there was certain litigation that Port Authority was involved in, I guess there would be a chance that it could come, before Commonwealth Court, in a certain, in a certain setting. So what does that experience of being a board member on a quasi, government agency that gets state funding, as well as, a county government, which we know is kind of a subset of state government, it's kind of how, state government disperses money, to local levels through the county. So how does that, kind of uniquely, position you, for this role?
Well, And I think you basically said it right there, Kahari. This is the court that handles really all things related to our government, those agencies, those lawsuits by the government, those lawsuits against the government and their agencies. And when I was on the Port Authority Board, we certainly had to deal with lawsuits in Commonwealth Court. When I served on County Council, we also had to deal with lawsuits in Commonwealth Court. And ironically, I and my colleagues were threatened with a lawsuit in Commonwealth Court if we decided to pass the ordinance to prohibit discrimination against people based on gender identity or expression. And as you know, we did that here in Allegheny County under my leadership and with my sponsorship, prime sponsorship of that bill, and making Allegheny County only the third county in the Commonwealth to have that legislation. But I think it's important for people to know that regardless of what their legislators do, that they send to Harrisburg, or that they send to the county councils, or that they send to the city councils, they run on different platforms about the changes they're going to make. It's important to know that it is generally going to be the Commonwealth Court that has the final say. Well, no, the Supreme Court, indeed, but it's the Commonwealth Court that can certainly have an impact on the laws that are being legislated. The court's going to be able to say whether they're constitutional or not, whether there was the authority to enact that legislation. And I understand this firsthand from my experience being a county council member and the issues that we had to deal with there. And from the Port Authority of Allegheny County, sitting on that board and dealing with the issues that we had to deal with there, funding issues, all kinds of government-related matters.
Absolutely, and if you could talk a little bit, and just as a programming note, Ryan had to step away for the evening, so I'll be, finishing, tonight's conversation solo tonight. But in one of the things that I found, was really interesting about your background is that you've done, a lot of voter protection work, and obviously, Commonwealth Court, we've seen over the years a lot of important decisions, have gone down. And of course, I don't want you, to, take a position, on a policy that could, prevent you from, ruling, on a case later. But if you could just talk a little bit about just your own experience doing voter protection work and how that could translate, in a way that you're comfortable as well as you're allowed to talk about. How does that potentially translate, into, a court where, we've seen, over the past 10 or 15 years, numerous, election cases, and we see, around the country, hundreds of pieces of legislation around election law being moved and passed, through legislatures, as well as here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about, during the past 20 years, I've done voter protection work here in Pennsylvania with a team of attorneys throughout the Commonwealth. And one of my roles is to make sure that anything that can deter someone from voting is addressed by application of the law, by application of just some mediation skills, to make sure that everybody can vote. And sometimes that also required evidence collection that could be used in court to maybe keep a poll open longer, or maybe to get an order so that a specific person can cast a vote instead of being disenfranchised. And it's been very interesting as well with some of the things going on about voter ID, about polling places open or closed. And November 2020, I was certainly on the front line there as well, and part of the legal team steering committee that developed the strategy surrounding those lawsuits that were brought against us here in Pennsylvania. And I think it's important for people to know that voting is considered a fundamental right, meaning that it's so important to your participation in our society and in our economy, that the government needs, the language is a compelling state interest, which is a high bar in order to take that privilege, that right away from you. And that has been basically behind the work that I've done as a voter protection attorney, making sure that people can vote and addressing those policies, addressing those issues that cause people not to be able to vote. And I think that it's more and more important that people turn out to vote, exercise their right to vote, because this legislation surrounding voting rights is developed by elected officials, signed into law by elected officials. So they want to have a say in who those elected officials are, and it does make a difference.
Right. And before we go, could you just share with us, what you see, as a top priority for you, if elected, to the Commonwealth Court, some areas that you really, really want to focus on?
Dealing with addressing bias. Bias has got to be one of the biggest barriers to accessing justice for most people. When we have bias in our system, we have people getting the process that someone believes that they are due, and not the due process guaranteed by our Constitution. And addressing bias requires a commitment and the habit of addressing it and assessing it, and constantly maybe playing with the facts. Would I be doing something differently if this person was of a different age or a different race? And it's those gut checks that you really have to do, those heart checks that you have to do in order to make sure that you're treating people fairly. And that's what has to happen. Also, calling out disparities that are in our system and advocating for changes for more even-handedness as well.
Thank you so much for that. And before we go, could you let folks know how they can get in touch with your campaign over these next 8 days? If they want to get in touch with you, if they have a question, how to contact your team?
Well, the website is www.amandagreenhawkins.com. You can learn more about me there. And you can get in touch with me at amandagreenhawkins.com. And we're on Facebook at Vote Amanda Green Hawkins, and Twitter at AGH4Judge. And at the email, you can certainly ask any questions there. And on the website, find out how you can help support me. And I humbly ask you for your support and your vote. Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, for your service over the years. And thank you for your friendship as well. Definitely tell Rome I said what's up. Hope he's doing
I sure will. Sure will.
Yeah, thank you so much for everything. Amanda Green Hawkins, candidate for Commonwealth Court. Thank you for joining us. Best of luck over these next 8 days and beyond. Yeah. And we look forward to being in touch very soon, and look forward to seeing you continuing on the trail.
Wonderful to be here. Good to see you, Kahari.
All right. Yeah, always great to see you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. And that was Amanda Green Hawkins to close out our statewide Judicial Forum. What a great conversation. Thank you to Ryan. Thank you to producer Gary for holding it down. Super shout out to producer Gary. So yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you for all the candidates. Thank you for the folks who joined us, and for the folks who will be joining us on the replay throughout the week. This is what it's about, providing a platform for the candidates to talk directly to the people without a filter, without us, trying to, manipulate the narrative. This is directly, from the candidates, and we hope that, we gave folks information to continue to make their decisions. I think there's a whole pool of fantastic candidates. You would wish that there was more seats available, because I think, I'm impressed by everyone that we spoke to tonight, and I look, forward to all these folks continuing their service, in whatever, realm they choose. So this is something that we're going to continue to do, not only this political cycle, but into the future. And so continue to stay tuned. We are putting together programming for next Monday night. Is going to be, a pre-election preview the night before the election, as we've done before last year's primary and before last year's general election. So definitely look forward to that next Monday at 7 p.m. The primary election preview with the team. Miracle will be back, as well as Ryan will be back in the house. But until then, for Miracle and for Ryan, this is Kahari Mosley. Thank you for joining us for another edition of the One Hood Power Hour. Again, thanking all the candidates running for a statewide judicial office that joined us tonight. Thank you so much for your time, and best of luck over these next 8 days. Until next Monday at 7 p.m., stay safe and stay engaged and stay involved in the process. Thank you. And don't forget to vote May 18th. Thank you.